Hello there guys, what is going on? SonOfChelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe on this Monday. Hope you had a good weekend. We're officially into Chelsea's pre-season. We've seen the players back at Cobham. Thomas Tuchel was back at Cobham today. But of course, all the attention is about transfer news, and some big transfer news today, or at least reports over Chelsea considering a move for Cristiano Ronaldo from Manchester United. I'm sure a lot of polarised opinion about it. I do have a strong opinion about it, which some people may not like, but we're going to get into that, the ramifications of that potential deal with Todd Boehly apparently going to Thomas Tuchel later this week to propose the idea of putting a bid in for Ronaldo. But as well, Raheem Sterling looks like he's close, and as well, on top of signing him this week, there could be another signing before we go to the US tour next week, which, you know, I think is interesting. And who could that be? It feels very much like it's going to be a defensive signing of some kind, whether it's Nathan Ake, Matthijs de Ligt, so we'll get into that as well. But before we do, make sure, guys, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of the uploads on the channel. Also, do me a massive favour by hitting that like button, because it helps new people find the channel as well. But this is the big news today from David Ornstein in The Athletic. Chelsea considering move for Ronaldo. United currently insists Ronaldo is not for sale and have reiterated that he is contracted until 2023, but the 37-year-old has made clear his desire to depart and did not return for pre-season training on Monday as scheduled, citing family reasons. And then Matt Law reported a little bit later today that Todd Boehly to ask Thomas Tuchel if he wants Cristiano Ronaldo at Chelsea. Boehly will check with Tuchel whether or not he wants Chelsea to make a bid for Ronaldo as the club attempts to wrap up a move for Raheem Sterling ahead of the squad's departure for their US tour. Tuchel is known to be an admirer of Ronaldo, but Telegraph Sport understands the German is yet to discuss with Boehly whether or not he would actually want to sign the 37-year-old and whether or not he believes he could fit into his team and style of play. And we did get a report as well from Nizaar Kinsella, now of the Evening Standard. So congrats to Nizaar for that change from Goal to Evening Standard regarding both him, Ronaldo, and Neymar, because apparently Neymar had sort of been offered to Chelsea as well. Sort of citing that Tuchel may not be in favour of going for another superstar because, of course, what happened with Lukaku. I did find this news slightly ironic because this morning I read a piece in The Athletic from Liam Toomey that I definitely suggest you go and read, all about Boehly, Tuchel, this sort of data-led approach to transfers, and kind of, you know, Chelsea starting to go in a new direction and hopefully making some shrewder signings, sensible transfers, as Tifo Football like to say. And then a couple of hours later, Chelsea are considering a move for Ronaldo. Now, listen, we are considering a move for Ronaldo. It's not like Chelsea, in the case of De Ligt, in the case of Sterling, in the case of Ake and other players, Rafinha, we're actually in talks to sign this player. It very much feels like this is all from the Ronaldo side. He wants to get out of Man United this summer, and there are only a few clubs who financially can make the deal happen. Chelsea is one of those. Bayern Munich is another one of those. I mean, PSG, I guess you could say, is another one of those. But whether that could actually happen, they're not really being mentioned at the moment. I am firmly against Chelsea signing Cristiano Ronaldo, and it's not just Ronaldo. I'm firmly against us signing Neymar as well. There are many reasons you can cite in terms of finances compared to, you know, where those finances could be better placed this summer for other players. The longevity of Ronaldo particularly, given he already wants to leave United after going back there last season, all the system problems that he had at United, and the constant debate that was had throughout all of last season, despite Ronaldo scoring a lot of goals, the sort of harm his lack of pressing was doing to that team, a pretty shambolic United team. But bringing all of that into Chelsea, and then you factor in what Chelsea have just sold or just loaned out in Romelu Lukaku, and a debate we had at Stamford Bridge for all of last season, compared to, say, Raheem Sterling, when I was like putting up the pros and cons of that move and saying, you know, this is a guy who will press, he plays in a system that, you know, isn't too dissimilar to Chelsea, he scored goals in the Premier League pretty recently, you know, he's probably young enough still to impact the team going forward, have that longevity, hopefully have an instant impact, Premier League proven product. There are more green flags than red with Raheem Sterling. With Ronaldo, despite him being Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the greatest players of all time, in some people's eyes, the greatest player of all time, there are more red flags here. I don't understand, and particularly on the Tuchel and Chelsea side, if Chelsea were to do a deal for either Ronaldo or Neymar, I don't think we can, all the idea of us changing our transfer strategy and being the smart guys in the room and maybe going down sort of the Liverpool route and Boehly being inspired by Liverpool, all of that gets torpedoed right from the off, because none of this would sort of suggest Chelsea are building for the long term. They'd be building for right here and now. They'd be going off instinct because it's a superstar. It's a massive superstar who will sell a lot of shirts, which I know a lot of people kind of bring up, but my colleague at Football London, Scott Trotter, sort of shared this on Twitter, that actually shirt sales don't have the impact people think they do financially. But yeah, he will obviously bring the brand of Ronaldo, all of that stuff, and I'm sure there'll be some people who just go based off that and look at the goals he scored last season for United. But it also just fundamentally goes against what Tuchel was trying to build last season, and it completely undermines if Tuchel, and it's a big if Tuchel wanted to sign Ronaldo, it completely undermines the argument about Lukaku. And because part of the big argument around Lukaku not working at Chelsea was the Belgian needed to adapt to Chelsea. He didn't press. Lukaku's coming to a European title-winning side. He needs to adapt to the team. He needs to press. You bring in Ronaldo, and you're not only in the same problem again, but it just kind of, to me, it completely undermines that whole debate we had last season. And the quote that Tuchel brought up after Lukaku's interview about, we don't sort of facilitate our system towards one player. It's all about Chelsea, one club. It's all about being a team. Again, it goes against and completely undermines and contradicts all of that stuff. And my hope is that on the Bowley side of things, he isn't sort of attracted to this statement marquee signing that we've heard many times from the likes of Matt Law and others as well, in terms of wanting to make a statement. To me, making a statement this summer is making a shrewd deal that transforms a key position in the team for the long term. You could argue, even though I'm not his biggest fan, Matthijs de Ligt does that for Chelsea for the next 6 to 7 years, let's say. Raheem Sterling could be that player. There's a certain central midfielder, I'm going to say his name, Declan Rice, I think would what I classify as a statement signing, who actually impacts and transforms the team, not only for next season. Financially, it makes a lot more sense. You're investing in a player for the future. I think about, I didn't really see this brought up today in terms of Ronaldo, but what happens to Kai Havertz? Because Ronaldo most likely at this age of his career would play as a centre forward. And all of the money Chelsea have invested in Kai Havertz, who it seems like with Lukaku gone, this is his season to really go on the run and become the number 9. It's mostly what I've seen is sort of negative toward this, which I think is a little bit nice to see, that Chelsea fans aren't just going flashy name, I want him in the team instantly. And some people are kind of seeing the red flags already. And I hope that meeting that happens between Bowley and Tuchel later this week, they just reject it out of hand, because I think there are much better players that we could be investing in, or not better players in terms of, listen, Ronaldo's an astonishing talent, but at his age, at what Chelsea are supposed to be building for the long term, and particularly under Tuchel, and trying to be smart, bringing in a sporting director, the finances it would cost for Chelsea, it just makes no sense with the amount of work we have to do. And I think he'd be better placed for Ronaldo going somewhere else or staying at Man United for another season. So fingers crossed, and I never thought I'd say fingers crossed, Chelsea don't sign Cristiano Ronaldo, but you've got to look at his age, you've got to look at what's happened post Real Madrid, where at Juve, despite all of his goals, they struggled greatly financially. It's really hit them. Man United, the problems they've had as well. And Neymar is exactly the same. A guy who just doesn't press, who I think has missed over 40 games through injury for club and country over the last 2 seasons. So you talk about Dembele as a younger player having injury problems. I mean, Neymar has had massive injury problems, and that's another one I don't want anywhere near the club, because I don't think either of them make financial sense. I don't think for the style of the team and what Tuchel was trying to build, or at least what we got presented he was trying to build, it makes no sense. So let me know your opinions on this in the comments below. This extraordinary story, which I'm sure will develop and will hopefully be sort of ended at the end of this week, where it was just a little bit of speculation. But as I said, with that Matt Law piece tonight, Chelsea would ideally like to sign 2 new players ahead of the US tour, with the club still trying to land a central defender alongside Raheem Sterling by the end of this week. Talks have been held with Matthijs de Ligt, Nathan Ake, Jules Koundé, Presnel Kimpembe and Kalidou Koulibaly, with Chelsea needing to sign at least 2 new defenders this summer. Andreas Christensen, his move to Barcelona was confirmed today. That second player could still be Rafinha, by the way. I mean, that's someone that I think a lot of Chelsea fans have sort of given up hope on signing, despite the fact we agreed a fee, and still I think are the only club to agree a fee for Rafinha. But obviously Barcelona have grown in confidence. There seems to be a sense that Rafinha wants to go there, but we'll wait and see on that one. But in the defensive side, Simon Phillips, I know there was reports over the weekend and from several reports out of Italy as well that Chelsea apparently made a bid for De Ligt that talks are progressing well, that De Ligt would be sort of open to making a move to Stamford Bridge. I've watched a bit more of De Ligt. I've sort of tried to challenge my sort of pessimism towards it a bit more. I think if you come at it from the angle, and I've seen this argument made, which I think is a good one in terms of what you would have to pay for, say, a Thiago Silva in the current market, or I'd frame it more in the sense of what we paid for Kai Havertz in 2020, of a player that you are going to, when you invest this much on a defender, and he would be like the record fee for a centre-back Chelsea have ever paid. I think the most we've paid for a centre-back is 35 million, which I think was David Luiz when he returned to the club. But to pay that much for a 22-year-old, you really are putting your confidence in that player that he's going to be here for the long term. And it seems like De Ligt is the clear one at the moment, but it's still quite confusing because you get reports every now and then that Koundé is still on the table, a player that had kind of agreed personal terms and sort of that deal was so far down the line on the player side for so long that went quiet, but it seems like there's still negotiations going on for Koundé. Kimpembe is kind of a new one in terms of, I know Matt Law reporting it. Koulibaly is one we brought up that I've been quite positive on the left side of the defence. My money's on De Ligt at the moment purely just based on the reporting, but Koundé, because that deal was so far down the line before in terms of the player side, you never know, it could sort of blow up again and Chelsea could get that deal done quite quickly. We'll have to wait and see. It does seem to be Sterling +1, and I spoke about Sterling in my last video at the end of last week, and listen, I think that it's a big statement signing. I really do. I think it's a positive deal. I know some people had objections to it at the start, but please go and read my piece. I wrote a piece with a little bit of Wisecout stuff in there about Sterling and all of the stats that I looked at with Sterling, some of them tracking back to like 15, 16 of wide forwards. I mean, and maybe you could argue we made these arguments about Lukaku last summer, but you just look at the productivity of this guy and it's just, I think, so impressive, and particularly with Liam Toomey's piece that I spoke about earlier in terms of maybe a change in formation and Tuchel really going for attacking wide players, aggressive wide players, and maybe moving away from the 3-4-3 into, say, a 4-4-2 was mentioned, a 4-3-3 potentially, which I think would help a few more players actually. I think that the likes of Christian Pulisic and Callum Hudson-Odoi, if they stick around, I think would be aided by that change a lot more, because we saw the best of Pulisic under Lampard when he played as more of a natural winger. You know, Hudson-Odoi quite clearly hit that role, fits him either on the left or the right, and Sterling and Rafinha, or maybe someone else on that side if Chelsea don't get Rafinha. I would be interested to see who Chelsea would go for, and I hope it's not Ronaldo or Neymar, but maybe there are other options out there. I consistently see that Serge Gnabry still has not secured his future at Bayern Munich. I think he's the same age as Sterling, 27. People have brought up Michael Olise from Crystal Palace, who I think is a really, really exciting young player. That would be one that would excite me, because I think he could really develop into a big player, and I think Palace would maybe jump at the chance to get a quick profit from him. There are other names out there too that I'm sure you guys will mention in the comments, but we're getting close to that first signing, and we're getting closer to the first game of pre-season. I'm really excited now, not just in terms of new players coming in, but looking at some of those training pics and seeing Levi Colwill now in training. The reports out of, I think, Holland today, that Ian Maatsen is likely to stay with Chelsea for pre-season, maybe the same for Dujon Sterling. I think it's really exciting that a lot of these players are going to get a chance under Thomas Tuchel, which is what I think a lot of, I've wanted. I think a lot of other people have as well. It's something that me and Nini spoke about last week, that I think is just so important, that again in the summer where Chelsea are going to be investing heavily in several areas, if Chelsea, like with Chalobah last year, can save a bit of money on a player being promoted in a key position like an Ian Maatsen, like a Dujon Sterling, Levi Colwill, I think it's going to make a huge difference this summer. It really is, and getting some of those wins in the transfer window, in a sense, internally, I think it is so important. So those are my thoughts. We're awaiting that big news, I think, in terms of particularly on Sterling. It feels like a few days now. It's kind of felt like on the brink. We're going to get that breaker. Chelsea have agreed a fee for Raheem Sterling. It kind of feels like it's nearly there, which I think is big, and it is quite surreal, I think, seeing Sterling become a Chelsea player. So hopefully I'll be covering that on the channel this week, and maybe another signing. We never know. Let me know your thoughts on everything I discussed in today's video, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.